You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, December 10th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us for this Hump Day edition of the Russ Belville Show. We're here every weekday live at 3 p.m. Pacific Time with replays at 6 p.m., 3 a.m., and 6 a.m. Pacific Time, so you can listen to us at your convenience, or you can go and download our episodes on demand. They're available at 420radio.org, also my personal YouTube channel at Radical Russ. You can also get podcast downloads through our 420radio.org. Just look in the main menu under programs and you should be able to find them. All right, on today's show, we got a very special guest joining us at 1:30. It's Dan Barton. He's with splashandashfordogs.com, and he's going to give us his expertise on marijuana and your dog. We've got a little PSA we play all the time here on 420 Radio about not getting your dog high. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in depth. We'll also take your live questions through our chat room or our phone line at 971-533-7111. Also on the show today, in the wake of the high-profile killings of unarmed black men lately in this country, many people, including President Obama, are calling for police officers to wear mandatory body cameras. But in the Radical Rant today, we're going to take a look at a report from Fusion magazine online that shows in some of the cities that have adopted these body cams, it really hasn't made that much of a difference. After all, what good's a body cam when the cop has the option of turning it off? We'll talk about that in the Radical Rant at the end of the show. Also on the show today, we're going to do some drug war data mining. There's a new poll out from NBC News and Marist University on how people perceive of police and their use of force in America. You will not be surprised to find that white folks and black folks have completely different opinions on this issue. So stay tuned for that in drug war data mining. We'll also go behind the headlines on today's show. Right after the news, we're going to take a look at another one of our retrospectives for 2014, since we're winding up this year and getting ready for the new one. This time, we're going to take a look back at the top 5 effed up things that cops did in 2014 to the cannabis community. So stay tuned for that. But first, we're going to start things off with the 420 Radio News. And in the headlines today, we told you yesterday about that must-pass federal spending bill that was going to ban DC legalization. Well, now the good news, it looks like that bill will protect medical marijuana and hemp states. We'll tell you more about that. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission has gotten approval for its budget to begin the implementation of Measure 91 here in Oregon. In Eastern Washington, the man who had the big pot auction and was trying to give away $14,000 to the local school district, well, he's finally found someone who's willing to take some free money. In Puyallup, Washington, speaking of Eastern Washington, the city council voted yesterday to prohibit all recreational marijuana businesses. We'll talk about that. In Uruguay, they're finding that their high school kids, much like American high school kids, are dropping cigarettes and taking up marijuana. We've also got a look at cannabis businesses and their problems with contract enforcement. All of that coming up on the Russ Belville Show in Hour 1. Then stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, where you are the voice of the marijuana nation. We take your live calls at 971-533-7111 and take a deeper look at the headlines of the day. Plus, you'll get your daily Toker tunes for Irie Wednesday, featuring Gordon Green from Gordon Green's Music Planet, which is playing tonight at 5 and 8 o'clock on 420radio.org. Stay tuned. The 420 Radio News is next. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for being here.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
You
can get 420 Radio on the go with the Ustream video app for Android and iPhone. Go to rad-r.us/420ustream or just click the Ustream app icon for Android or iPhone below the live radio feed at 420radio.org. Five of the last 9 major party candidates to run for president, 3 of the last 9 vice presidential candidates, and the last 3 two-term presidents have all smoked pot. Marijuana, the gateway drug to the White House. This is the Russ Belville Show. Professionals Against Prohibition, replaying Thursdays at 10 Pacific on 420radio.org.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact Normal at norml.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, December 10th, 2014. The final must-pass federal spending bill that Congress will consider this week includes an amendment that prohibits the U.S. Justice Department from spending any money to undermine state medical marijuana laws. This amendment would protect the 23 states that have passed traditional medical marijuana laws, as well as the 11 states that regulate high CBD oils. The spending bill also includes a bipartisan amendment that prohibits the DEA from blocking implementation of a federal law passed last year by Congress that allows hemp cultivation for academic and agricultural research purposes in the states that allow it. It also contains an amendment blocking marijuana law reform in Washington, D.C., although it is unclear what exactly the amendment blocks. Members of Congress have offered differing opinions on whether the language in the spending bill stops Initiative 71, which legalized personal marijuana cultivation and possession, or just prohibits D.C. from going further and enacting legalized marijuana markets. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission can begin implementing Measure 91, which legalized recreational marijuana in the state, thanks to a vote Wednesday by the Emergency Board. The board, which is comprised of state, House, and Senate members, approved a $583,000 loan for the OLCC so it can hire staff, pay for legal advice, and begin its outreach efforts. The money is coming from the state's liquor dollars, with the promise that the OLCC will pay it back by the end of the 2015-2017 budget cycle, using revenue generated by marijuana sales. The agency has many regulatory tasks ahead of it, including how to decide where marijuana can be grown and sold, how it should be labeled, and whether to allow medical growers and dispensaries to participate in the recreational industry. The Eastern Washington man who wanted to give $14,000 of his pot auction proceeds to the local school district has finally found a willing recipient. The Prosser School District rejected his offer, explaining it would not be in the interest of students. Then the Prosser branch of the Boys and Girls Club also just said no to the marijuana money. The farmer said he eventually gave $1,000 to the local Veterans for Foreign Wars post and $13,000 to a local needy family which asked not to be identified. Locals thought the schools and the club were unwise to reject the gift, with one man noting, quote, "They take money from the lottery, they take money from the wineries, they take money from breweries, distilleries, and some of the marijuana tax that's going to the state is coming back to them. They should have taken the money," end quote. The Puyallup, Washington City Council voted 5-2 Tuesday to prohibit all recreational marijuana producers, processors, and retailers. But the council stopped short of banning medical marijuana shops and collective gardens after overwhelming opposition from patients. The regulations come just before a December 31st expiration of a moratorium that was extended several times over the last 16 months. The delay was intended to give city officials time for research and deliberation about Initiative 502, which voters approved in 2012 to create a regulatory system for recreational marijuana. Conflicting pot laws and concerns about I-502's lack of revenue sharing with local governments prompted the proposed ban. Tuesday's council vote went against a planning commission decision from January that recommended the city allow the businesses in certain areas of the city. Uruguayan high school students, like Americans, are smoking more marijuana than tobacco. A nationwide survey on drug consumption released Wednesday by the National Drugs Board says 17% of Uruguayan high schoolers said they smoked pot in the past year versus 9% for tobacco. It's the first time since the survey began in 2003 that marijuana consumption is higher than tobacco use among high school students. One of the many difficulties marijuana-related businesses face is the lack of contract enforcement. When one cannabis business filed for bankruptcy in Denver in 2012, it was denied protection by federal judge Howard Tallman because it was a marijuana-related business. Quote, "Federal law trumps state law," said Bob Hoban, a cannabis attorney in Denver. "In any federal court involving marijuana, the judge is bound to invalidate contracts or the party's right to bankruptcy protection because marijuana is still federally illegal," end quote. Without bankruptcy protection, marijuana businesses are not allowed to dissolve or disappear without paying back debt obligations and instead face debt collection by judgment enforcement. This has been your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, December 10th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville.
420 Radio is 24-hour marijuana legalization radio.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
The Russ Belville Show reminds you to never smoke and drive impaired. Hang out for a while. Share. NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs.
There's so much I worry about as a mom. Stephen Harper thinks that organized crime should continue to profit from marijuana prohibition. Imagine regulating marijuana like alcohol and cigarettes with a strong and clear educational message, making it more difficult for my kids and your kids to access. Drug dealers don't ask for ID. Stephen Harper does not have the kind of judgment we need to protect our children, authorized by the Normal Women's Alliance of Canada.
Welcome back, everyone. 13 after the hour, and time for us to go behind the headlines, where we're continuing to take our look back at 2014. And today, we're going to take a look at the top 5 effed up things cops did to tokers in 2014. As we continue to tear down this Berlin Wall of marijuana prohibition, we keep finding more information about how cops have been abusing the rights of marijuana consumers in their prosecution of the drug war. So here are 5 instances where cops did some pretty messed up things. Number 5, Nebraska cops complain about Colorado weed crossing the border. Sheriff Adam Hayward is a sheriff of Dual County, Nebraska, a small rural county near Colorado, who said, quote, "We have had a significant increase in the amount of cases and incidences with marijuana coming across from Colorado. 1 in every 5 cars, we are now finding something in there. We are paying for them to be housed. We're paying for them to be fed. We're paying for their medical expenses, which a lot of them do have. And then a lot of them, even though they have money to buy drugs, they don't have money to pay for an attorney. Therefore, the county has to pay for the public defender." End quote. So, cops in Nebraska are complaining because they want to prohibit marijuana, but the state next to them, Colorado, is profiting from legal marijuana that makes its way across the border, threatening Nebraska's prohibition. Yet when tribal cops from the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota want to prohibit alcohol, the state next to them, Nebraska, is profiting from 4 beer stores selling 10,000 cans of beer per day in the border town of White Clay, Nebraska, population 10. In other words, Colorado's bad for enabling Nebraska potheads, but Nebraska's not for enabling South Dakota reservation alcoholics? Number 4, one Seattle cop wrote 4 out of 5 public toking tickets. In August, Seattle Police Chief Kathleen O'Toole reassigned a police officer who reports showed had written almost 4 out of 5 of the 83 citations for public pot use since January. The biannual report on marijuana enforcement also showed that 36% of public toking tickets were written to African Americans, who only make up 8% of the Seattle population. Chief O'Toole writes, quote, "In some instances, the officer added notes to the tickets. Some notes requested the attention of City Attorney Peter Holmes and were addressed to Petey Holmes. In another instance, the officer indicated that he flipped a coin when contemplating which subject to cite. In another note, the officer refers to Washington's voter-enacted changes to marijuana laws as, quote, silly," end quote. Number 3, an Illinois cop admits to smearing vehicles with weed for future canine stops. Of course, the use of drug dogs or canine officers to smell illegal contraband has long been a tool in the cops' arsenal to bypass the protections of the Fourth Amendment and search citizens' cars at roadside traffic stops. In May, this damning testimony from an Illinois police officer detailed how some cops abuse that power to conduct policing for profit. Officer Michael Reichert, in a pretrial deposition in Collinsville, Illinois, said, quote, "We'd go to a hotel or grocery store parking lots, throw drugs on U-Haul trucks, underneath big trucks and 18-wheelers and so forth," acknowledging that it was sometimes done without the vehicle owner's permission. And sometimes, he said, marijuana was wiped across a car door. He said the dogs can detect the smell, quote, "for a time," end quote. Have it. Number 2, DEA supplies secret tips to local drug cops. The program's called the DEA's Special Operations Division, or SOD, and a report from Reuters blew the lid off of the use of intelligence intercepts, wiretaps, informants, and a massive database of telephone records from federal investigations used for domestic policing. SOD comprises units from many agencies, including FBI, CIA, IRS, Homeland Security, and the National Security Agency, which was revealed by whistleblower Edward Snowden to be engaged in data mining and spying on U.S. citizens. That federal cops might help state and local cops catch drug criminals isn't the shocking part. There's nothing illegal or untoward about that. The shocking part of SOD's operations is something known as parallel construction. This is a technique SOD uses to instruct local cops once SOD has given them a tip, so all evidence of SOD's involvement is erased from the forthcoming trial. Think of it like money laundering, except with the investigatory process instead of illegal cash. And the number one effed up thing that cops did to marijuana consumers in 2014, prosecutors tried to blame Michael Brown's killing on marijuana wax. The killing of unarmed black teenager Michael Brown by white cop Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, concluded with the grand jury declining to indict Wilson for any crime. Testimony released from the grand jury shows the prosecutors brought up Brown's marijuana use 44 times, referring to the 12 nanograms of active THC found in his bloodstream and implying that he was hallucinating and psychotic from using marijuana concentrate. The grand jury heard that 12 nanograms of THC, quote, "could have potentially caused a loss in perception of space and time, and there was also the possibility that there could have been hallucinations," end quote. They were told that Brown had a conversation about marijuana wax before he died, and, quote, "if one were to ingest that, would you be consuming a higher level of THC than you would if you were to have smoked or ingested the plant material?" End quote. And the grand jury was introduced to experts who argued whether, quote, "you cannot draw any conclusions that he was suffering or that he was experiencing hallucinations or having a psychotic break," end quote. Those are the top 5 most effed up things cops did to tokers in 2014. I had to restrict the list to just 5 in the interest of time. You'll be able to read this at hightimes.com and my blog, radicalruss.com, coming up shortly.
This is bullshit. It's like Cypress Hill concert in here.
All right, hey, time for us to take a break. It's 4:20 in the Mountain Time Zone, so all our legal tokers in Denver, Colorado, time for you to take that break and enjoy a little herbal relaxation. And for those of you in the non-legal states, yeah, go ahead. We'll be back with some drug war data mining, a new poll from NBC Marist, right after this.
420 Radio, the activist radio station. Hey tokers and tokettes, Radical Russ here for the Cannador, a practical solution to keep herbs from drying. The Cannador is the perfect airtight storage system for your fine herbs, from the half-inch thick walnut and cherry wood construction, clear top perforated jars for storage, and the humidity bead system that keeps your herbs at a perfect 65% relative humidity. I keep all my herbs in the Cannador, and you should too. Check out Cannador.com for more information. 420radio.org presents Electric Bob's Boogaloo with Electric Bob from Scottsdale, Arizona. Electric Bob expands the Russ Belville Show's Electric Tuesday into a full show featuring the best in electronic dance music and experimental music. New every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific with replays Tuesday at 5 and 8 Pacific on 420radio.org. Get.Buzz. .Buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .Buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .Buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .Buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Welcome back, everyone. 22 and a half after the hour, and today we get this poll just released Sunday from NBC News Marist University entitled Race Shapes Americans' Attitudes About Decisions in Ferguson and Staten Island. Of course, they're referring to the grand jury's decisions to not indict police officers who killed unarmed men in Ferguson, Missouri, and Staten Island, New York. Michael Brown in Ferguson, Eric Garner in Staten Island. This has ignited a wave after wave of protests all across the country and a new insight into police use of force. Questions being asked that maybe some people hadn't thought about before. And this poll here from NBC Marist shows that there is a great divide in racial perceptions when it comes to our police. And this is not a surprise to most folks, but let's take a look at some of the numbers within the poll. First of all, 43% of Americans say the grand jury decisions in Ferguson and Staten Island have decreased their confidence in the legal system. That's among everyone. But if you look at it by race, twice the number of black people, twice the proportion of black people, 70% of black folks compared to 35% of white folks report decreased trust in the legal system. So twice as many black folks have looked at Ferguson and Staten Island, and that has decreased their trust in the legal system compared to white folks. And as far as law enforcement in the United States, 72% of Americans have a great deal or a fair amount of confidence in their local police force. 72%. But if we break that down by black and white, it's a 4-to-1 margin between white support for cops and black support for cops. 50% of white folks trust officers not to cross the line when dealing with a suspect and use too much force, whereas only 13% of African Americans are likely to trust an officer not to use excessive force. And when it comes to whether or not we perceive cops as treating white folks and black folks the same, that also shows a great racial divide. More than 8 in 10 African Americans, 82%, believe police have different standards based on race. 82% of black folks believe cops treat black folks differently. But a majority of white people, 51%, do not think that is true. 51% of white people believe that cops treat blacks and whites equally. But 82% of blacks don't agree. Also in the NBC Marist poll, 52% of whites express a great deal of confidence in their local police not to discriminate. Only 12% of African Americans agree with that sentiment. And more than 3 in 4 Americans, 77% of Americans, say that they have confidence that their local police will do a good job enforcing the law. But if we break that down, 55% of whites have great confidence compared to 17% of African Americans who have that confidence. The only issue on which blacks and whites agreed in this poll is in thinking that police officers should be required to wear video recorders to monitor their policing. More than 3 out of 4, regardless of race or age, believe that cops should have cameras on them. Now, when you take a look at and drill down in these polls, another thing that I find interesting, for example, on that first question, do you have a great deal of confidence that the police do a good job enforcing the law? Looking at any other breakdown, whether it's Democrat, Republican, you don't see quite as big a gap as you do in the racial gap. 55 to 17 in a great deal of support or a great deal of confidence in the police. There's a slight breakdown by Republican or Democrat. 73% of Republicans have a great deal of support, confidence in the police versus 35% of Democrats. Men and women are about equal. When it's broken down by age, the older you get, the more likely you are to believe cops or to have trust in cops. But from that point on, there's really no other demographic that seems to break one way or the other. When it comes to excessive force, similar breakdowns. Republicans are about twice as likely as Democrats to believe that cops won't use excessive force, and young people less likely than older people to believe cops won't use excessive force. Aside from that, though, income, region, and education don't seem to matter.
420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts. Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net.
Georgia.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
Mark Twain once said that when there's a gold rush, it's a good time to be in the pick and shovel business. Today we look at the rapidly evolving markets in the marijuana green rush in our Cannabis Chronicles.
Welcome back, everyone. Half past the hour, and joining us today, we've got Dan Barton from splashandashfordogs.com. Dan, welcome to the show. Hello, Dan. Are you there? All right. Trying to get Dan to answer on the line here. We'll try give him a call back here, see if we can get a response. Splash-and-dash-for-dogs.com. And of course, we're also going to ask Dan a few questions about marijuana and your dog. There are many folks that are interested now in using medical cannabis in a veterinarian sense to be able to help their aging animals or their injured animals. And many people have questions about that. Dan, do we have you on the line?
I'm here.
Hi, Dan Barton from Splash-and-dash-for-dogs.com. Thanks for joining us on the show.
No problem.
All right. So wanted to start off by asking you about that website and your product, Splash-and-Dash for Dogs. What is this?
Well, we are a groomery and boutique for everything dogs. So, we have grooming services. We have a lot of retail products. We specialize in high-end dog food and unique retail products or various products for dogs.
Oh, excellent.
So we have several stores. Several stores throughout the country. The one thing that makes us uniquely different is we have a membership bath program for dogs. So a pet parent can bring their dog in an unlimited number of times throughout the month, and we'll, keep the dog clean for you.
Oh,
that's what really makes us unique.
Well, that's awesome. And located in some of the legal states or medical states at this point?
We're not yet. No.
Okay, which state?
But it's changing all the time, so it's just a matter of time before we're in a legal state.
Okay, but people can find all your locations at splash-and-dash-for-dogs.com.
That's correct, and we also offer franchise opportunities. So if somebody is looking to get into the pet industry, then we offer a franchise model as well. And all of that's on the website as well.
Oh, excellent. Okay, Dan. Well, what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is, we've got more and more states legalizing marijuana. We're up to 4 now. We got 23 medical marijuana states. And this, of course, opens up the opportunity for pet parents to be possibly concerned about their dog either being exposed to smoke, vapor, edibles, or possibly even on purpose using cannabis as a medicine for their dog. What kind of recommendations can you give us when it comes to dogs and cannabis?
Well, I think the first thing that is important to understand is very new. It's in its infancy stages of whether or not there are true scientific benefits for a dog using it. At this point in time, there's a lot of vets that through their own individual practices have heard great stories or great success stories of pet parents using it, but we're not at the point where we have scientific proof. So it's very similar to if you think back many years ago when, before states started becoming legal, where there were all of our friends and family members who we personally experienced where when they used marijuana, it was very helpful in relieving pain. And so the pet industry is kind of at that stage still. So we have a lot of pet parents that have given their dogs marijuana, and typically the cases have been where the dog has terminal cancer, the dog's in pain, and they've given the dog marijuana to help, relieve that pain and make them comfortable in their last few days or last few months of life. And that's been primarily the use up until this point. But now that, it's everywhere in the media, we've got more and more states coming on board, we're beginning to see more and more use of it in that type of application.
Excellent. All right. So what are some of the do's and don'ts? What should you not do when it comes to marijuana in your dog?
Well, I think it's, you shouldn't be blowing smoke directly into the dog or a cat's face. The way that they, if you were going to give your pet some marijuana, then you would do it through the food source, and they would ingest it and take in the benefits that way. So blowing smoke is not good. And, you want to be careful when you do mix it in their food, that you want to mix it in their food that is safe for them. So, dog food or canned dog food is fine. You want to be careful of mixing it into a human ingredient and then giving it to them. Some dogs, chocolate is very toxic to dogs. There's different vegetables that are toxic to dogs. So you're safer if you are going to give it, use it and give it to them in either dry food or with their dog food, so that it's not mixed with other ingredients that they can't have.
Right. I understand there's a lot of different foods that we should be aware of that are not good for dogs, things like onions, for example. Do you have any list of those sort of things for us?
Well, those items that, and we have your typical food items that dogs should not have. I think what's important, though, is, when we have pot in our house and we begin to cook with it, maybe we make some brownies, or we're adding it into butter, or we're adding it into, some oils. It's important that those types of items that we may think is not a big deal, like mixing in with brownies, that we don't give brownies to the dog, or we don't give the infused butter to the dog. And that's where the real danger is. Giving it in their own particular dog food, no problem, because the core food there is not a problem for them to adjust.
Now, as far as a dog accidentally getting into your stash or into your edibles, what are some of the effects people could look for to maybe diagnose that this might have happened?
Well, one of the big things is looking at their pupils. So they would have, dilated pupils. So that's very easy to notice. They're also going to be very lethargic. And there's possibility of seizures. And, and that's something that, certainly if seizures start, then you need to rush to the emergency room right away. But the dilated pupils, being lethargic, those are the more common things that you would see, as signs.
Gotcha. Now, as everyone knows and is fond of saying in the marijuana movement, nobody's ever died of a marijuana overdose. At least a human hasn't. Is it possible for a dog to die from a marijuana overdose?
Well, again, like I said in the very beginning, when we're still at the infancy stages of this, I have not personally heard of any cases where a dog has overdosed. But again, because we're still in the beginning stages of this, it is very possible, I think, that you potentially could. If they get too much, again, you think about our body size versus a dog. Most dogs, the average dog that most humans have, is typically between 10 and 21 pounds. And so if they got into your stash on accident, they may not die from the an actual overdose, but the seizures may, cause other problems, and then ultimately they could potentially die from one of the side effects, maybe not necessarily the overdosing. But, I think that everybody would agree the best practice here is to, make sure your stuff is safely secured, and whether it's a dog or small kids in the house, you want to make sure that it's secure from both of them, so that accidents, like that don't happen.
Right. Now, what are the characteristics of these seizures? Are we talking about a dog like, trembling, falling over, drooling? I mean, I've got some folks in the chat room that are a little doubtful of this. They say they've used cannabis with their pets and haven't seen anything even close to a seizure. I mean, what's this like?
Well, everything that you said are all possible signs, right? Each dog is different, just like each person is different. We all react slightly different to the different amounts that we take, and so your pet is going to be the same. And unfortunately, at this point, we don't have the scientific study, to be able to say exactly, what to look for. But those are the common things that when you talk to vets that have had patients come in, that's what they say they see or hear from a pet using too much.
Yeah, we had my wife and I had a skipper key dog for a while, and it was an older dog, maybe 15 or 16 at the time. Not a big dog, maybe 12, 13 pounds, and got into some marijuana brownies and did exhibit those kind of seizure. He was drooling, his eyes were dilated, he was shaking really badly. We couldn't discern, though, whether it was from the chocolate or if it was from the cannabis.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's exactly, when we were talking earlier about ingesting, and, it's not so much the marijuana, but sometimes it's the combination of the marijuana and the chocolate brownies, or the other food item that it's being mixed with.
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, it's very possible that your dog would not have experienced any of that had they ingested the marijuana through, some wet food or dry food.
Yeah, and it's kind of thing now where we're just kind of shooting in the dark, because it's not like they've done double-blind studies on this kind of stuff. We're just, going off of people's anecdotes. And if someone says they see their dog seizing, well, maybe it's the pot, but maybe it's what the pot was in. It's hard to tell at this point.
Right, and that's why, if you feel that you want to give your dog some, then, doing it in a controlled environment. So a controlled environment would be if you have always fed your dog XYZ canned food, right? And the dog eats the food and has normal bowel movements, acts normal afterwards, and that has happened over several months, then there's no type of allergic or any other type of issues with that canned food. So that would be a great food to mix the marijuana with. Now add the marijuana and in different doses and watch what happens. And so now if you mix it in and the dog's stumbling over or lethargic or dilated pupils, vomiting, seizures, whatever, then at least it is directly related to the marijuana and more than likely the overall amount that you mixed in.
Well, it's always good advice to keep your stash locked up, whether there's kids or pets around. And I can't disagree with not blowing smoke in an animal's face. They don't really have much say in something like that. And I'm against drugging any being without its consent. So Dan Barton from splashandashfordogs.com. Thanks for joining us here on the Russ Belville Show and offering a little perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. When we come back, we'll have time for a little bit of a radical rant. Body cameras. Everybody's calling for body cameras with respect to these cops, but we've got some data that show that it may not do any good. Stay tuned for that right after our anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
I used to do drugs, and one morning I woke up, I looked in the mirror and I said, "You look frightening." Nobody said quit, and nobody said stop or else. I got sick of it, so I quit. And now, life's the beach.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality in general.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 46 after the hour. And of course, since the grand jury's non-indictments in Ferguson and Staten Island, many people have been calling for police to be outfitted with these so-called body cams. President Obama called for millions of dollars to be dedicated to outfitting cops with body cams. But there's a new report coming out of Fusion online at fusion.net where they looked at 5 police departments that already have these body cam programs, and they revealed that pretty much the body cams help the cops. They don't do so much for helping out the citizens, but they're really helpful for the cops. And in 2 of the cities they took a look at, they found that having body cameras didn't change anything about the number of police shootings or use of force incidents. And it's really easy to think about. Just think about your average cop show. There's a million of them on TV. They all have some alphabet name for them, right? And in that procedural crime drama, they've got the bad guy, right? The perp. He's in the interrogation room, and the cops are behind the glass looking in at the detective who's grilling the subject, right? And then there's that dramatic turn where they're not able to get anything out of the guy. So the cop leaves, the detective leaves the interrogation room and goes and talks to the cops behind the glass and says, turn off the cameras, turn off the mics, so they can get all rough with that suspect and find out what's really going on, right? That's such a trope that you've seen it in a million movies or a million TV shows about police procedure, right? Turn off the camera so it can get real. And that's the problem with these body cameras that are being suggested and implemented throughout the United States, is that the cops control the record button. They can turn the camera off. What good is it for us to outfit cameras on cops to presumably catch the bad ones who like to violate police procedure and citizens' rights, when the bad cop has the option of turning the camera off when he's being bad? Now, if there were some policy enforced that said anytime a cop engages with a citizen, the camera has to be turned on, and if it's not, there's severe punishment, maybe that would help, but there is none. There's very, very few punishments meted out against cops who turn their cameras off. So if they've got nothing to fear for turning the camera off, and everything to fear if the nasty shit they did got caught on camera, why wouldn't they turn the camera off? Oh, there's a malfunction in the camera. Oh, there's a problem with the camera. But when the camera's turned on, they'll usually turn it on when something favors their account. Let's take a look at some of these cities that they looked at here. First of all, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, you may recall our stories from New Mexico from, 2013, was it? When they were body cavity searching all of these prisoners that they, or all these suspects that they pull over for the minor traffic infractions, subjecting them to enemas and colonoscopies. Remember that? Well, Albuquerque, New Mexico, they implemented these body cams for these cops in 2010, 4 years ago. They implemented these body cams. How well did those body cams help any of those poor New Mexico people who ended up anally penetrated and vaginally penetrated by law enforcement searching for drugs. Cameras didn't help those folks. And in fact, when you look at the number of police-involved shootings in Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's actually gone up. Compared to the 6 years before they had body cameras, in the 4 years since, there's been an increase in police shootings in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, in Albuquerque, they've got a department policy that says all contacts with the public that could result in complaints against the department's personnel will be recorded. If you're going to have a contact with the public that could result in a complaint, you've got to have your camera on. But Fusion, when they looked at the data, they found that cops violated that procedure 60 times in 2013. 60 times they turned the cameras off. And 28 times that have been recorded in 2014 so far. In fact, just this last April, an Albuquerque police officer shot and killed a 19-year-old woman. And there was no camera rolling at that point. Let's take a look at New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, Albuquerque, they've got, New Orleans, they've got 448 cameras on 1,136 officers. And of course, a 26-year-old man got shot in the forehead during a traffic stop. The female cop that shot him, her body camera happened to be turned off at the time. A report from the U.S. Department of Justice found that cameras and body cameras, that would include the body cams and the dash cams that the cops have in their cars, were not used in 60% of the use of force incidents reported between January and May of this year. 3 out of 5 times that the cops used force, they turned their cameras off. Let's take a look at Salt Lake City, Utah, where they've got 420 officers, how ironic, and 180 cameras. In Salt Lake, there have been 9 use of force incidents, 9 use of force incidents in 2014, but only one of them got recorded on a body camera, despite an official department policy that states their cameras should be on at all times when interacting with the public. At all times. But somehow, 8 out of 9 use of force incidents, the cameras weren't turned on. Gee, how did that happen? Oakland, California, 704 cops, 462 cameras. Now, in Oakland, they've been using body cams since 2011, but at least 2 officer-involved shootings managed to not get filmed. An independent monitor found that between July and September in Oakland, officers failed to activate cameras at critical times, while others went weeks without recording while waiting for broken cameras to be repaired. And finally, Fort Worth, Texas, 1,560 officers, 420 cameras. There's 420 again. And they wouldn't release very much data at all. But they found that all allegations made against police officers since the 1st of January were either unfounded or did not result in discipline. So, the Fort Worth Police Department, 1,560 officers, not one of them was guilty of excessive use of force. Not one. Out of all the complaints, these cops were perfect. Sure they were. And of course, you have to ask the most important question. Even if we did have these cops wearing these cameras and took away from them the ability to turn those cameras off, what good would it do? The Eric Garner case. filmed by a citizen with a cell phone gave us better video than we could have had with an officer's body camera. And it clearly showed an officer using a prohibited chokehold. And it clearly showed officers piling on him, and it clearly let us hear Eric Garner say 9 times, "I can't breathe." It clearly shows those officers standing around his limp and lifeless body, not offering CPR. It clearly shows EMTs checking the body and not offering any sort of resuscitation. What good did the camera do for Eric Garner and his family? Slapping a bunch of cameras on cops is not going to give us the lasting change that we need. Now, I do encourage it, but only if the cops do not have control of the record button. I don't know what kind of technology is involved here. I don't know why it even has the option of turning that camera on or off. Is it a question of video data storage room? We can't have the camera on at all times throughout the entire shift because we just don't have enough hard drive space, or we don't have enough flash memory space? I refuse to believe that. I stream a live show every day. I do 640 by 360, 128 kilobit encoding every day here. And my 2-hour stream takes up a little more than a gigabyte of data. And that's full color. So are you telling me that we can't design a body-worn camera for a cop that can record in black and white and monophonic audio for an 8-hour shift from beginning to end? Really? Is that what you're telling me? When I have thumb drives like this one that can hold 8 gigabytes easily. Is this an 8 gig? Oh, there's a 2 gig, but still. Thumb drives like this size that can hold up to 64 gigs now. You can't tell me there's not enough data storage space to record an entire cop's day. A cop's entire day. There's no reason you can't record the entire day. There's no reason the cop should be able to turn that off. We're going to have to do so much more to be able to reform our police, but getting some transparency and accountability is the first step. But that doesn't matter if there's no enforcement mechanism for that first step. We need to make sure the cops understand they are to be held accountable. They are to be videotaped and audio recorded at all times, and that any use of force by a cop against a citizen should involve a prosecutorial team that is independent from law enforcement. The cops need their own cops, their own investigations that are independent. We can no longer rely, and I'm telling you, the grand juries have taught us this in these recent weeks, that we can no longer rely on prosecutors who are buddy-buddy with the cops to hold the cops themselves accountable. The culture of law enforcement just will not allow it. The adversarial system that we have just will not allow it. I applaud the idea of adding body cameras, but they need to be on for the entire shift without any mechanism for the cop to turn it off. And some serious repercussions if that cop blocks the view of the camera, if the camera gets mysteriously broken, etc. Folks, that's all the time we got for Hour 1. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Toker Talk Radio Hour 2. We'll take your calls at 971-533-7111. More talk about the news of the day. Plus, Gordon Green will be calling in, giving us some interesting Irie Wednesday music, a song in Spanish from a German band. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you